Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipster Podcast. This is your host, Jamil Hassan, the Crypto Hipster, where I bring you founders, entrepreneurs, co-founders, executives, musicians, artists, you name it, all around the world in crypto and blockchain. And today I have an amazing guest, and I'm going to start off the bat by telling you that I failed to ask how I pronounce his company. His name is Tyler Adams. He is a CEO, but I don't know if it's COZ or COZ. And I'm going to ask Tyler to tell me, and then ask Tyler to ask everybody to welcome Tyler to the show today.
Sure. So it's actually both. It's an acronym from our original organization's name. So some people call us COZ, like the people that have known us for a long time. But a lot of people now refer to us as COZ as well. So we kind of go by either one. I call it COZ, but that's because I'm familiar with the acronym. I view it as an acronym. So thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. And we're going to get into that. The first question is going to be, what is your background, and is it a logical background for what you're doing now?
Sure. So my academic background is in mechanical engineering and systems engineering, specifically like controls and robotics and statistical process control and modeling. I'm pretty heavily in the systems camp. I do a lot of statistical analysis, a lot of kind of hardware development, a lot of planning and architecture development across the entire engineering space. I've been working in blockchain since full time since around 2017, doing pretty much everything from core like layer one protocol development and statistical analysis and modeling, all the way up to like end user product development and live activations for these like large blockchain organizations. And that's with the kind of the greater COZ team.
Awesome.
So it's pretty relevant, I suppose.
Yeah, it is. It sounds it. It sounds engineering's good. It's tough. COZ. What is that all about? What does it stand for? And how are you positioned to become a competitive player during the next NFT growth wave?
Sure. So we COZ originally, as I mentioned, it's an acronym, so it stands for City of Zion. A lot of people in the community that is familiar with us would remember us from the original kind of Ant Shares to Neo legacy rebrand initiative, when Neo kind of took prominence as a top 5 by market cap layer one protocol around 2017, 2018 timeframe. So that's where we started, and we began doing documentation actually. And then we also started doing product development, things like smart contract compilers, software development kits, wallets, explorers, as I mentioned, protocol analysis and evaluation. Some of our team members have split off and built decentralized exchanges or identity solutions, which is kind of where I went for a period of time. We've also really been pushing for the past few years on building out the N3 platform, which is Neo's new layer one offering, and all the tools and infrastructure there. And then we've also been really focused over the last couple of years as well on the end user product experience. So how do people who aren't familiar with blockchain getting into this space, how do they interact with the technology, which is relatively complicated? How do we remove a lot of those barriers to entry? Within the NFT market specifically, we've been working on a kind of a tangential technology to NFTs called NFIs, or non-fungible items. And these are cryptographically authentic physical assets that are counterfeit proof. And they are bound to what we're calling a digital twin on the blockchain. So people can write software which interacts with physical assets, like your hat or your shirt or for, if you have jewelry. So we've done a number of activations this year with rings called one-band rings, where people can get the rings and they can go through a conference and they can interact with different applications, all on chain. So that's kind of the area that we've been working in. When we talk about like this idea of engaging people who aren't in the blockchain ecosystem, that's kind of an example of what I'm talking about. Pulling in stuff that people interact with every day. They don't necessarily need to know it's blockchain, but the interactivity is there. Really using this technology as a tool.
Awesome. So I have a follow-up. NFIs, right? In the last year, 2 years ago, my podcasts were all about the NFT hype. And I would say hype, content creators are happy to be making money for the first time. That's great. I loved it. You can see the energy and the excitement. Over the past year, a lot of the talk has been about moving people from Web 2 to Web 3. And now recently, it's okay, how do we attach blockchain and crypto to real world assets? So with these NFIs, what are you seeing have been the primary drivers of this shift to wanting to attach to real world assets?
Sure. So there are a couple really big areas of interest here. The logical one, I think, is the counterfeit proof value proposition of these fungible or non-fungible tokens which are on chain, right? So that's one of the value propositions of NFTs, right? They're counterfeit proof, they're original. You can prove ownership and you can prove authenticity. When we talk about these large kind of very high dollar value items like artwork or these like luxury lifestyle goods or collectibles, that authenticity and being able to prove ownership and the provenance of those assets is kind of key. So that's one of the major drivers for this technology. But there are a few others as well. One of them is in gamification. So we talk a lot about the metaverse, right? And this concept of the metaverse, especially how NFTs fit into that experience. But there's a really large market for people with interactivity of physical assets as well. People like gamification in marketing operations, for example, or strategies, right? You can imagine like a loyalty rewards program where you have a physical asset and the rewards are actually tied to the physical asset instead of your account. So you have maybe a collectible backpack, for example, or jacket or something. And that jacket entitles you to special privileges when you go to a sports event, for example. Like maybe you have like a team ring, for example, for football, right? And when you bring that ring, the ring acts as your ticket into the stadium. And as you use the ring, it actually improves your discounts and rewards over time. And if you sell that ring, the ring's rewards actually go with it, and the value proposition goes with that ring as well. So the gamification is kind of important. I know I went off in a bit of a marketing tangent there, but that is a very big driver for a lot of this technology as well. It's really grabbing consumer loyalty and kind of rewarding them for that. It's also, there's a big driver as well for people to increase the value of their products. I kind of alluded to this idea mentioned this idea that the assets themselves retain these capabilities or this ledger of information. It's kind of the provenance to some extent that changes the value curve of the physical assets. So a lot of things like you buy a jacket, for example, as soon as you check out, that jacket starts decreasing in value, right? This technology has the opportunity to change that value curve so that the jacket actually increases in value over time, similar to a lot of these luxury lifestyle brands and the way that they've positioned their products, because you can get things, the utility of the jacket can actually increase over time through the software. So that's another really big value proposition that is being that's kind of demanding this technology as well. So yeah, those are kind of the areas that we're interested in, and we've been pushing for, and we've actually been pulled as well. And it's been kind of fun. It's been a really interesting market. A lot of it, as you mentioned, it's pretty new, so we're still kind of exploring and identifying what those, like, where the technology can kind of change how we interact with things on an everyday basis.
Awesome. Actually, value to me, it's funny because I have like some really nice winter jackets that my wife bought me, and then I have this thing that I bought from TJ Maxx. It's cost like $19, and I can wear it when it's -40, and I can wear it when it's 50 degrees, and it works all year long. And it's like the most utility I think I own. But let's talk about, you're in Colorado, and there's something there. I want you to please, I ask you to please talk about it. Denver Walls, right? What's that all about, and what's your role in its production?
Sure. So COZ was the tech partner for this Denver Walls Festival, and it's part of the Worldwide Walls kind of initiative or organization. This was the first year that it was in Denver. It's also in a number of other cities, like I think LA, Tokyo, for example, like these large cities, and it's a mural festival. So muralists from all over the world fly to the city, in this case Denver, to paint these absolutely amazing murals. Some of them are like, one of them was like a 1,600 square foot parking garage, for example, and it's the floor of the parking garage. Or another one was from this muralist, Nichos from Vienna, who flew out, and he painted a 50-foot tall mural on the Mission Ballroom, which is kind of a historic ballroom and concert venue in the River North District. So these artists all flew out to Denver to paint these murals over the period of a week. And then there's kind of an ongoing festival around the public arts in Denver as a result. And for COZ, we were the tech partners. So we embedded this NFI technology in a bunch of bronze plaques that are attached to the murals. And then people can go around to all the murals and they can collect them in, as I was mentioning, kind of this augmented reality, like kind of value proposition experience, where they can go around and collect unique signatures from each mural. And then in the near future, they'll be able to redeem those at local vendors for discounts. So I kind of mentioned this marketing loyalty kind of rewards program. In this case, that's a little augmented. The goal is to really drive community growth and engagement within the River North District in Denver. So people can go around, they collect all the murals and interact with it and learn about the artists. And then they can burn the signatures of those murals on chain to redeem discounts. So it's a completely decentralized app and experience. And it's effectively peer-to-peer. You have the muralists and then you have the vendors in town.
Awesome. And what was the excitement and engagement level like?
It's pretty good. I don't have the final numbers for the event. It was easily a few thousand people at this specific event on the festival day. But most of these murals have permanent licenses. So they will be up indefinitely. The plaques they're still there. And they'll be there in some cases for probably the next 5 to 10 years. And they can continue to be reused in this way. So it's kind of it's an interesting proof point for the technology, and it's an area that we're really motivated to grow. We're big fans of public works, and the public art scene is really amazing. And working with some of these artists who are really the best muralists on earth was really amazing. It was a great opportunity.
I ask about the excitement and engagement because the NFT industry um, has seen better days than in this past year, right? Um, you've seen a lot of valuations for these JPEGs, or the board apes, or the crypto punks, or whatever. The value going down, right? What is the future of the NFT industry? Because what you're seeing excitement at the community level, yet their engagement on the level of crypto industry has been down. So that seems like a what do you call it, opposite points of view. So what do you see as the future of the industry for NFTs?
Um, sure. So I don't. I agree. I think the market, the market's down from the collectability perspective. I think the NFTs are going through what feels a lot like the 2018, 2019 like fungible token experience. It feels very similar, where there was this novel concept that showed up, and a lot of tokens showed up as a result of that, right? Both in the 2017, 2018 time period, as well as with NFTs now, right? And in that experience, there was a lot of searching for utility and true value, like intrinsic value in it. And I think that while the market is kind of coming down, or is down right now, or it's kind of deflated, I guess, a little bit, I think that what's going to come out of it is true utility. And then just like with the fungible tokens, now there are fungible tokens. They have utility. There's like a core value proposition. The tokens from 2017 that had a utility and proved their value stuck around, and new tokens are showing up which have utility. People perceive the tokens as being something that has to have a purpose, right? And I think that as those utilities show up for NFTs, the market will build back up. We're kind of in this phase where we had this like novel concept. People have been building it and trying to understand it and play with it and learn how to use it properly to fit into their business models. And in that experience, some of these concepts don't work out very well. So there was this inflationary or this bubble type of situation, and now that's deflating a little bit. But I think a lot of the core utility is showing up. Like, there is value from people playing with the technology. So I think in the next, just like with the fungible tokens, in the next 5 years, that's going to come back. But everything that comes back will have this core intrinsic value to it. It's certainly also interesting a lot of the recent like developments with AI showing up in parallel to the NFT market has certainly not helped that. I think we've used that technology a little bit in-house as well when we talk about some of our activations, and it certainly it's benefited us from an art direction standpoint. I think from an NFT, when we talk about NFTs specifically, the value of having like the real artist developing the stuff is kind of interesting also. Like we try to push and engage with artists as much as possible to do the original art for any visual assets that we use for NFTs. And we try to put like their signature on it and things like that, just to increase the value proposition of them. But yeah, I think it'll come back. It's that searching for utility.
So, okay, so you see similarities, I mean, between the 2017, 18 ICOs and the NFTs, but And I can see that too. But you see the similarities now with AI and those two.
Not so much with AI. I think it's interesting that there were a lot of advances, especially with products like Midjourney, for example, where NFTs were showing up, and these products showed up, which really um, made it even easier, I think, to mint and generate these tokens. That it probably acted as an accelerant in the market, right? Because it made it, when we talk about a fungible tokens are much simpler in a few ways than a non-fungible token. When we start talking about a non-fungible token, especially the way that most people would probably perceive them, right? There is an image that's a requirement in a lot of people's perspective and how they would define an NFT. The ability to produce those at a large scale makes them kind of helps to saturate the market, I guess. Like they became something where they would have historically been more difficult or more labor intensive to produce. Now they're much easier to produce. So they've kind of acted as an accelerant to like flood the market and overinflate it, which ultimately kind of leads to a deflating as well. So I don't know that the AI drive is going to be similar, although it probably will be. This is kind of a common trend in technology, right? I think the AI technology, which has shown up in combination with NFTs, kind of pushed the market past where it probably should have been.
Yeah, how do the crypto and tech industries facilitate the merge of physical and digital worlds?
So I think one of the intrinsic value propositions of blockchain is that it's sovereign, right? So it's self-sovereign, and in a lot of cases, physical assets are also, right. You can have custodial physical assets where you have like a vault or something like that, which is held at within an organization. You have to get approval to get access, right? Like a safety deposit box, for example. So that would be a custodial physical asset storage. But inherently, like physical assets are self-sovereign or they're non-custodial. Like you have your glasses, which you're wearing, right? Those are your glasses. You have sovereign access and control of those glasses. The blockchain, in a lot of cases, at least for permissionless blockchains, is the same way, right? It's a sovereign, permissionless solution. Because of that, I think the technology pairs really well with physical assets. There have been major pushes within what I would, I guess, call the traditional tech world to add or implement this concept of a digital twin. And what I mean by that is having a digital analog to a physical asset. And this helps a lot with advanced engineering, especially hardware engineering, where you can run modeling, you can do simulations of the technology or a physical asset. You can see how they would perform in different conditions and environments. The blockchain space, what it's providing on top of that is the provenance capabilities, right? Which blockchain is very good at. When you execute a transfer, that goes onto the ledger. Everybody can see that. It can be asserted. You can assert your authenticity. You can assert your ownership. I think what we're really trying to work on is trying to merge those two concepts together as they both kind of approach each other, whether we're here or not. It's kind of an inevitability, in my opinion. A lot of these physical assets, as I mentioned, like this digital twin technology, is being pushed very hard because it's ultimately required by a lot of these organizations to even exist. The technology that is being released now for like a phone, for example, or an airplane or an automotive, um, it's so optimized for its environment that you have to run these simulations. You have to have a very advanced software model in order to ensure that it can perform. Integrating that with the blockchain capabilities gives you a lot of interesting data from a metaverse perspective that I think is going to show up probably in the next, when we talk about like fungible tokens and the utilities and the utility and things like that in the near future, right? Where you would actually have access to maybe a digital twin of an automotive, which you own. And you can prove that you own it through this NFI technology, right? So I think that's how the two spaces are kind of helping each other, and they're driving towards this integration. I think it's an inevitability. It's just when that will happen. If it happens, in the next 5 years, if it happens in the next 10 years, it's definitely in the near future, though.
Got it. I want to get into the concept of the digital twin and the metaverse. I don't know if you remember if you watched the Super Bowl between the Rams and the Bengals, but 2 years ago. But that year we had during everybody else is focused on what the halftime show was, what the game was, and I was like, we just witnessed 13 metaverse commercials, but I'm like the only person who picked up on it, like in the room, you know. And the digital twin, it's kind of like the Princess and the Frog right now. But how can NFTs, while NFTs enhance local experiences and benefit communities, what will the role of the metaverse be in life experiences? And I'm assuming that's not just going to be at the community or local level; it's going to be global.
Yeah. So and this will be more from the context of NFIs, although the value proposition in that area is kind of similar, right, with a slight twist on it. I think what's going to be really interesting is as we see these products kind of proliferate into the market and become more commonplace, is the idea of crosstalk between different experiences. I mentioned this concept of having a jacket, right, where you have this jacket and it has a digital twin. Has this NFI technology embedded in it. And maybe the company that has the jacket or that produced the jacket, they are sponsoring some event where if you go and you collect, and I'll use a Colorado example here. Maybe if you take a photo of yourself wearing that jacket on every 14er in Colorado, you get a discount at their store, right? And you also get you get a merit badge that proves that you climbed it. It's recorded to the digital twin that you've done it, but you also get a badge, right, on the jacket, so you can show off. Like it improves the value of the jacket, right? In addition to that, in parallel, there may be a metaverse game which also uses the same jacket and it uses the same data, because again, it's on a permissionless chain. It's sovereign data. It's associated with the jacket itself, and you're the owner. So you could also grant access to that data, that activity, to another app, which is maybe an alternate reality app. And I like to use the example of like going to Vegas to fight dragons instead of just playing cards, right? So maybe you go to Vegas and you're wearing this jacket, and because this jacket has gone to every 14er, it's this very rare thing. It gives you a stat boost for your character when you go to fight a dragon in Vegas, for example. And then maybe somebody else has another asset. Maybe they have a watch, for example, and that watch, it's been to, maybe 5 or 6 different film festivals, right? And maybe that watch gives you other perks in that same game. And that watch has, it has its brand recognition and experience associated with it as well. But it gives you other value propositions in the same game, right? In another metaverse game, those same two assets may have a different value proposition as well. And I think this concept, you know, I'm using the example of physical assets here, NFIs, but this also exists for NFTs as well, right? So this crosstalk between the NFTs within experiences is kind of where I see that kind of almost being required for it to take off. I think it's although I'm also, when I think of NFIs or physical assets, you're kind of limited to space. There's like I have to wear this stuff, or I have to have access to these physical assets. They take up room, right? When we talk about digital tokens, you know, that's not necessarily the case. So there's a little more flexibility there. You know, you can have a wallet with 1 million tokens in it, for example, and they can all be, they can have individual value propositions. But I think the inherent, like the intrinsic value of the individual tokens will probably increase as interoperability starts to show up. And I think that's where a lot of the metaverse, like kind of the idea of the metaverse is as well, right? You have this archetype that can be used within a bunch of different ecosystems. And that's something that I kind of feel like is being missed heavily right now. If I'm being honest, within the NFT kind of space, or this metaverse experience.
Is the interoperability.
Yeah, interoperability. I think that's kind of important. Although I also, as I mentioned, from an NFI perspective, there's much more value on that, because you're not walking around with, you know, 1 million like coins in your pocket, for example, or jackets on. No matter how cold it gets, you're not going to be wearing all of these things on you. So my perspective may be somewhat biased there.
How about, what's the future for NFTs for institutions look like? Is that the same thing, or is it going to be different for them to be able to move forward and build that into their operations?
Institutions are always harder. They're easier and they're harder. I think when we talk about like an internal adoption for internal tools is one thing that's much faster. Right? You can have an internal team which builds out their solution for this within their closed ecosystem, right? It's a very controlled environment. They have complete control over the technology. That's a lot easier. When we start talking about a global fabric for this, effectively like a public like blockchain implementation that is used by institutions, that and having this NFT infrastructure over the top, that's much harder, right? Because you're inherently asking these organizations to give up some level of control when they don't necessarily have to do that. So the value proposition for the technology needs to be very, very extreme, right? Because they can't necessarily reset, right? And they're also putting their reputation on the line. If it's broken, it's irreversible. It's there on public ledger for a very long time, right? Indefinitely, really. So that's much more complicated. I'm generally a big proponent of the idea of having a hybrid solution where you have basically an internal ledger at an institution, at an institutional level, and then there's some integration or interoperability between those private ledgers, or like private layer 2 solutions or side chains, if you want to call them that, or as an alternative, and then some public ledger which they interface with. So similar to the way that the internet is built. right, and designed, and the way that we interface with that. So most organizations or institutions, they have a private intranet, and then they communicate with the internet. I imagine that would probably be the same approach for some sort of NFT or tokenized adoption as well. I think it's a very big risk for an organization to fully expose their and give up control by moving or deciding to move into a public ledger. I think it makes sense when we talk about like the public sector, but even then, that's also a big risk as well. So the value proposition is really pretty critical to nail down and get right. Otherwise, there won't be any adoption. Even when there's adoption, it's going to take a very long time if there is public adoption. I do know there are some inroads into that. There are a lot of organizations that are investigating it. In most cases, it's at a private level, though. It'd be kind of an intranet type of integration with a miner. As I mentioned, from an architecture perspective, you have these private ledgers, and then you have a public ledger which they interface with. So similar to this internet architecture.
I wonder if that's how JP Morgan does it with their lounge in Decentraland, or Morgan Stanley does it with their stake in Polygon. They're using it for private purposes. I don't know.
Yeah, it's possible. I think that when let me clarify here. When I mentioned the institutional adoption and integration, what I mean is like at a core integration level, right? Where they are using that for day-to-day purposes within their organization, when they're using it as a major like area within their value proposition. I think a lot of the integrations we're seeing now, and there are a lot of, like Macy's had an NFT, for example, right? At the parade. Like there's a lot of playing with the concept of NFTs and tokenization by these large organizations, but this ingrainment of the technology is like a core part of their offering, is the part that is going to take a long time. I think right now there are a lot of organizations that are playing with the technology, as we were talking about earlier. They're kind of exploring. They want to get their foot in the door. They want to taste the technology. They want to try it out and see if it works for them, just so they can really understand what it is, and also communicate to their audience and their market that they are aware of the technology and they are working with it to understand it better. I think that's really what we're seeing right now with a lot of these big players. They want to engage with the technology to show that they are a player in the market, but they're not really biting off a large chunk of it. And they're not really willing to fully integrate it yet or adopt it yet, because there is a big risk associated with it. As I mentioned, it's relatively novel, right?
Yeah. So I have two last questions. One I just came up with because I think it's important. There are a series of articles in smaller publications across the United States that say, where the author has said NFTs are dead. Obviously, after speaking to you, they're not. What would be your advice for these journalists going forward who think the NFTs are dead? What do they need to know? That's top of the mind, that to say that hey, they're very much alive and well.
So I think in talking to a number of journalists over the years, it's a hard job to cover so many topics thoroughly and in depth, right? That's an insane amount of work. To me, I think it would be important for them to probably dig a little deeper and kind of look at the forest instead of the individual trees. I think maybe there's a kind of an optics issue there, right? So I certainly don't think it's dead. I think quite the opposite. I think there's this idea that the technology, because it's kind of taking a downturn, and there's this search for utility in the technology. Just because there's a search for the utility and there's an exploration of like this novel technology doesn't mean that there isn't core utility that's there. When I look at like the overall technology, like NFTs are something that, like, at a core, like, intrinsic value proposition perspective, have existed for a long time. Like, we use tools like this all the time off chain. It's just finding like and building that technology in a permissionless, immutable ledger that's people are trying to understand. I don't think I don't think they're dead. I think it's digging deeper than, reading somebody else's headline or looking at the overall market trends or looking at the price and making that decision. I don't want to say that it's poor investigation, but it generally feels that way. And that's kind of my perspective when people make a statement like that, right? It's kind of that only a Sith speaks in absolutes.
Right. I agree. This has been a wonderful conversation. I enjoyed speaking with you. Yeah, I feel better about NFTs in the future than I did when I first started this interview. So this is great. Thank you. I have one final question, and it is it's an easy one. How can people find out more information about you, about COZ, about what you do, about what you're up to? How can they do any of that?
Sure. So you can follow me, or actually it's probably easier to follow COZ_official on Twitter, or at coz.io for more information about our organization. For the physical assets and the NFI work and technology that we're building out, we've actually just spun off a subsidiary called item.systems, which also has a website, item.systems, and that's where a lot of the work that we spoke about is listed, including the Denver Walls consensus and Token 2049 work. So thanks for having me on. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you very much for your time today.